I want to discuss now the outstanding figures in Spanish Jewish life in the so-called Golden Age of Spain. The Golden Age of Spanish Jewry is that period beginning around 900 and going up to 1200. In that 300-year period, we have in Spain the efflorescence, the growth, the explosion of Jewish culture on a very high level. Now, who were the great poets? The greatest poets who wrote in Hebrew following the rise of the Arabic Islamic civilization, which influenced the Jews. Another thing about the poetry. The Arabs, from the days of the Quran, are deeply impressed with language, speech, oratory, and they began to write poetry using as their model the language of the Quran, which they consider the classical Arabic spoken by Muhammad. But the Arabs also developed a system of poetry, a style of poetry, and that was rhyme and rhythm. Now you might say, well, isn't that what poetry is? Yeah, but there's a lot of poetry which doesn't have rhyme or rhythm. And one of the greatest examples of that is the poetry in the Bible. Biblical poetry, and it has power, and it has a rhythm, but it's not designed on the basis of there has to be an exact beat in the line as we are accustomed to in what we call normal poetry. I'm not talking about free verse, but normal poetry, you have the beat of the line. Can I compare thee to a summer's day? I mean, this is the beat of what we would call standard English poetry. This kind of poetry doesn't exist in the Bible. The Bible has a different kind of poetry. The speaker, and most of this is in the prophets, the book of Job and the book of Psalms are full of it. Something is said and then repeated using different words. So it is called parallelism. The first Psalm. Blessed is the man who has not gone in the way of the deniers, who has not sat in the seat of the scornful. In other words, the same thing is said using different words. That's biblical poetry, and it reaches great heights of beauty. I mean, the prophet Amos, when you read him and you see the way he used language, and Isaiah and all the others. But the Arabs had a different thing. They developed what we call rhythm and rhyme. And one Hebrew poet, one Jewish poet, decided he's going to imitate Arabic style. His name was Dunash ibn Labrat, and he started to use Arabic style in Hebrew poetry, and then others began to use it. And finally, Hebrew poetry, as developed in Spain, adopted this system of rhythm and rhyme in their poetry.